it's just an idea that that art's, especially sculpture, is made from stuff in the world, right? And this kind of ties back to the title and the little bit I wrote in red. The idea of sculpture as a potentially transformative process where something banal, mundane, ordinary is handled mentally, physically, and then becomes something other than what it was. So it's really a question of, well, what is it now? I don't necessarily know. But so I'm using stuff like this in making sculpture, see your Home Depot stuff, things that wouldn't be considered really special. A little bit about process. This is a sculpture from a few years back. The sculpture is wood. Behind here, it has a cast aluminum, a hollow cast aluminum part that's painted. So that's this is how it looked when it was finished. And then I'll show you a few images of when it was made. So in about maybe 10 years ago, my process of making, I make drawings. I create drawings on thin pieces of wood, plywood, luan. This is a piece of luan, which is a mahogany. Work the drawing until I feel like something's there, and then I cut the drawing out and turn it into a template. So that's the start of my process for how to make my work. The drawings themselves are based, at this time they were really based on trying to create a geometric form that was simultaneously organic. So it felt like a bodily reference, like it related to something that's growing. Now what I'm doing is a little bit different. So in the foreground, I took that template and then I've kind of cut out larger shapes of wood. This piece is a piece of styrofoam, which is the beginning of a pattern that turns into the cast aluminum part. So one of my own passages as an artist, earlier on I liked to do things that were very immediate in terms of sculpture. So fabricated metal, maybe some woodworking, things that when I would do them, they were done. That was the process. The process is pretty linear, and I could tell where I was at all times in it. Now I do the opposite. I do a lot of mold making, a lot of times overly complicated processes that sometimes turn out, sometimes don't, and are multi-staged. Another image. So this is the pieces of wood in the foreground, the little foam part. That's a casting pattern. Process of making for me is experimental. So I have an idea what I want, but the idea is really more a feeling. It's really more an emotion than it is a blueprint or a image. And then I try to work in the studio with the sculpture until what I have in the physical form matches the feeling that I have for it. It's kind of hard to explain. So it isn't like I set out to make something that looks like this. I have no idea what I'm doing usually. Just do it. Yeah. And then the finished sculpture. So the pieces of wood were joined and finished and painted. The little aluminum casting is back here. That was from that foam pattern. So I'm going to describe another process. And there are a lot more stages in this. I just wanted to give a little bit of an overview to you folks about the notion that you see that one sees the finished sculpture, and I'm kind of playing to multiple audiences. Someone who's made sculpture art will see one thing and will understand the layers of process embedded within the final work. Other people will just see this. And I'm interested in do I have something to say to both of those audiences, or what do I have to say to both of those audiences, knowing that they don't necessarily connect. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the process. This is the most recent sculpture that I have images for. The image is a little dark. The sculpture I finished in maybe January. This part is cast bronze, and then it has some cotton strap. And originally, it didn't. The cotton strap was pretty much just like I got it from the store, and the sculpture wasn't happy with that. It complained. So I treated the cotton with some paint to kind of integrate it a little bit more. So that's where I ended up. To make the sculpture, the original drawing was pretty close to what this looks like over here. And I came up with that drawing. And a lot of what I do is, I would understand it as indirect. And so in having that drawing, then I carved this little part out of wood. And it felt, I did about 3 versions. But a lot of what I do is involved with failure. Usually I have to make a sculpture twice, sometimes 3 times to get it to a point where I feel like it's okay. And that was the case here. So this is about the 3rd version, and it's a real simple part. It's not big, but that's what it took. I made a rubber mold of it, which I'm showing you over here. And then I duplicated it. So these are cast plastic. So I made 3 identical pieces from that original wood. And then this is the pattern that I used, the casting pattern, to make the finished sculpture. Once I had that casting pattern, I made a rubber and plaster mold, and that's over here. It's opened up. So if you imagine it closed, and then there would be a hollow space, a negative space. Then I pour wax in there and get the shape that you saw in wood and plastic in wax. And recently, what I've been doing, within the last year or 2, is once I have the form in wax, I felt like my work was getting kind of stiff, and I wanted a different time signature in the work. I wanted some immediacy. So what I've been doing lately is when I have the piece of wax and I finish it, meaning I make it, I work it until it resembles the wood pattern pretty closely. Then I usually take about 30 seconds and destroy it or partially destroy it. So I'm interested in how that reveals the structure and distorts it simultaneously. So what happens there? So this I consider a failed version. That was the first one I did. Yeah. The wax is taken into a mold making process. The mold's heated, the wax burns out, and then metal is poured into the mold. So these are just a couple images of that, and that's a whole other discussion. But the basic notion is whatever there is in wax, the goal is to then get that into metal. So this also deals with the title for this talk, and in a general way, states of matter as parallel to states of being. So taking a single form that goes through changes in material and in states, solid, liquid, gas, how that's influenced my thinking. This is a similar part that is a finished, well, not unfinished casting. So this was the form that was in wax. That's from that original pattern I showed you. And then this is extra metal that's going to be cut off in the ceramic shell mold. So what I'm interested in, and I think one of the reasons I'm a sculptor, is ultimately I want my finished work to be anonymous. I don't want it to be about me, and I don't want my hand to show in it as my hand. Simultaneously, I want the sculpture to